Farhad, and today we're going to be going over the evolution of quality attributes in Agile software development. So what are we going to look at today? First, we're going to define some key terms, then we're going to go over different Agile methodologies, give examples of them, after which we'll look at the evolution of quality attributes in the Agile lifecycle, we'll review some stakeholder feedback, and finally, we're going to give a conclusion and some recommendations. So let's begin by defining some key terms. Firstly, what is Agile software development? Agile software development is an iterative and incremental approach to software development that emphasizes flexibility, collaboration, and customer satisfaction. Key characteristics of Agile software development include iterative and incremental development, an emphasis on flexibility and adaptability, an emphasis on it being a collaborative approach, a customer-centric focus, an emphasis on continuous improvement, and a focus on empirical process control. And then our next key term is, what are quality attributes? Quality attributes are also known as non-functional requirements or quality characteristics, and these are the properties of a software system that describe its overall quality or behavior beyond its functional requirements. So not what it does, but how it does it. And some common quality attributes include things like reliability, performance, scalability, maintainability, usability, security, compatibility, availability, and testability. These aren't all of the quality attributes, but these are some very common ones that you'll run into a lot when using the Agile methodologies. So let's look at two different Agile methodologies, and we're going to look at Scrum versus Kanban. So Scrum is an Agile methodology that emphasizes teamwork, accountability, and iterative progress towards specific goals. So in Scrum, the work is separated into fixed lengths, which are called sprints, where the teams collaborate to complete tasks from the product backlog. And Scrum defines roles such as the product owner, the Scrum Master, the development team, and also has ceremonies like sprint planning, daily stand-ups, sprint reviews, and retrospective meetings. And this framework really fosters transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So it allows teams to continuously enhance their processes and deliver value to customers with greater efficiency. Kanban, on the other hand, is a visual framework that's aimed at managing work in progress and streamlining workflow. It prioritizes the reduction of bottlenecks, shortening lead times, and maximizing productivity. And work items are visually represented on something called a Kanban board, which typically organized into columns depicting different stages of the workflow. And Kanban really stresses the importance of limiting work in progress to prevent system overload and maintain a consistent flow of work. It also promotes continuous improvement through regular reflection and adaptation. So let's look at some of the differences between these two and how they address quality attributes. So we're going to look at three key quality attributes, that being flexibility, scalability, and maintainability, which are very important for most all projects. And in Scrum, it provides flexibility by allowing the team to adapt quickly to changing requirements through its iterative and incremental approach. So at each step, you can make adaptations, make changes, something like this. And scalability, Scrum is inherently scalable, and it can be applied to various levels within an organization. And finally, maintainability, Scrum emphasizes delivering a potentially shippable product increment at the end of each sprint. So with Scrum, the goal is that at the end of each sprint, you have something that can already be shipped and deployed, or something that's already ready to be given. Kanban, on the other hand, provides flexibility by visualizing the workflow and allowing teams to continuously prioritize and adjust their work based on whatever they need. Scalability, Kanban is highly scalable because it does not prescribe to specific roles or ceremonies. So you have a lot more room for changing how you do your work or how you complete it. And finally, maintainability, Kanban promotes a focus on continuing improvement and minimizing work in progress. And by doing this, your project is overall more maintainable and it's easier to manage. Up next, let's look at some examples of Agile methodologies and where they have been used. So some popular companies that you might have heard of, well, you've obviously heard of these companies like Google, Cisco, Sony, Adobe, and Spotify. All of these have used the Agile methodologies in their software development, which just goes to show how effective and how good this methodology is for software developers. Now let's look at the evolution of quality attributes in the Agile life cycle. And we're going to start with the early stages. So this is the inception and planning. And we're going to again look at flexibility, scalability, and maintainability. So for flexibility in the early stages, there's a strong focus on defining the project vision, goals, and requirements. So you want to have everything ready, and this is the part where you can decide what your project needs, what you want it to be like, and you have a lot of freedom in choosing all of that. And during this stage is when you really encourage flexibility and you encourage different ideas. For scalability, it's not as prominent in these early stages, especially if you have a smaller project or working with a smaller team. But the Agile methodologies still provide frameworks and practices that can help scale to larger projects. And finally, maintainability. Agile teams prioritize practices such as continuous integration, automated testing, and refactoring, all of which ensures that the code base remains manageable and adaptable. Let's look at our next stage, which is development and iterations. So during this stage of the Agile lifecycle, for flexibility, we practice iterative and incremental development, which allows for regular inspection and adaptation. And doing this enables teams to respond to changing requirements and also to respond to customer feedback quickly, which means it's very flexible and it's very easy to adapt and change. And then scalability. So as your project progresses, scalability becomes more and more necessary, especially if your team gets bigger or if it's a larger project. And during this time is when the Agile frameworks that something like Scrum provides guidelines for scaling up, and it helps you to scale up. And maintainability, Agile teams prioritize clean code practices, code reviews, and continuous integration, all of which work to ensure that the code base remains maintainable and easy to evolve over time. And you don't want it to become something difficult or negative that holds back your project. The next stage in the Agile lifecycle we're going to look at is testing and quality assurance. So for flexibility during this stage, there's an emphasis on the importance of continuous testing and quality assurance throughout the entire lifecycle. And you want to integrate the testing into each iteration to allow for early detection and resolution of defects. So at every stage, you want to practice such testing so that you can make changes and adaptations as needed. Next, we have scalability. So in this stage, you want to adopt practices like test automation or behavior-driven development and continuous delivery. And all of this ensures that testing efforts can keep pace with your evolving project, can grow with your project as your project gets bigger. As for maintainability, the Agile teams really focus on building a comprehensive suite of automated tests, including things like unit tests, integration tests, and acceptance tests. And the purpose of these is to catch regressions and ensure that new features don't introduce defects and that your project can continue to be maintained as it gets bigger and as it progresses into its later stages. Speaking of which, now we're going to talk about deployment and operations. So for flexibility, there's continuous deployment practices enabling teams to release new features and updates to production very quickly and safely. And it also allows for you to respond to user feedback and market demands very quickly and very easily, which makes it very flexible. As for scalability, some considerations become more prominent during deployment and operations. And you can adopt something like DevOps practices to automate deployment pipelines and scale infrastructure as needed. And Agile frameworks obviously provide guidelines on how to do this. And for maintainability, maintaining the product in production requires ongoing attention to ensure that reliability, performance, and security don't falter. And so you want to really prioritize monitoring, logging, and having continuous improvements to address issues proactively. So as soon as they happen, you want to react and then act and do something to help mitigate it and keep your project maintained. Now we're going to look at some stakeholder feedback. So people who have actually used Agile methodologies in their projects, in their products, and what common feedbacks they give. We're going to look at the trends in their feedback. So this is the most common feedback, most common comments that people receive for this agile methodologies. And first, a very positive comment is improved communication collaboration. A lot of stakeholders highlight the positive impact of agile practices on the collaboration and communication of their teams. Additionally, they appreciate the flexibility and the adaptability that is offered by agile practices, which allow teams to respond quickly to changing requirements and priorities. Additionally, agile practices emphasize delivering value to customers early and frequently, and this is something that stakeholders often perceive as beneficial for ensuring the quality attributes align with their customers' needs and expectations. So these are all very positive reviews that the Agile methodology has received as feedback from stakeholders. Continuing on, stakeholders also frequently report improvements in product quality and reliability as a result of adopting Agile practices. Again, more positive feedback, but there are also some downsides, which we'll look at next. For example, one negative, I suppose, feedback that we can consider is that some stakeholders, they're concerned about the challenges related to technical debt and maintainability, particularly in fast-paced agile environments. So balancing the need for rapid delivery and long-term maintainability of the code base, it's a recurring challenge, and it can definitely be something very difficult and costly for teams. So it's something that needs to be considered and discussed upfront. Additionally, a lot of stakeholders generally recognize that while there's a lot of benefits to agile practices, there's also an importance of continuous improvement and refinement, which again can take up a lot of resources and time. And if a team is unprepared for, they may not be able to execute it. And so this is another feedback that's given commonly by stakeholders. Now let's go over our conclusion and give some recommendations for people who really want to, use these practices for themselves. So recommendations. It's very important that you prioritize your quality attribute goals early, and you want to prioritize them early in the project lifecycle and ensure that they align with the project objectives and the customer needs. Additionally, you want to establish continuous feedback loops, and you want to have loops with stakeholders and end users to validate and adjust quality attribute goals throughout the project. You want to have regular review meetings, demos, and retrospectives that provide opportunities to gather feedback and make informed decisions. The point of all of this is that you can stay on top of your project and you can ensure that a lot of feedback is taken back and applied to improve it. Additionally, you should embrace cross-functional collaboration. So teams should leverage diverse skills and perspectives of team members to address quality goals collaboratively. As we said earlier, scalability and collaboration are very key components of agile practices. So it's very important that you take them into consideration to ensure that all aspects of quality are considered and prioritized. Additional recommendations include that you want to integrate quality assurance practices in the development lifecycle, and you want to have a focus on continuous testing, automation, and validation. You can adopt techniques like test-driven development and behavior-driven development to ensure that your quality attributes are validated continuously. Because this is an incremental system, you want at each step to ensure that your quality assurance practices are still there. And finally, you want to have a focus on delivering value to your customers. So you should prioritize delivering value to customers early and frequently, and you should ensure that your quality attributes contribute to the overall user satisfaction and business value. And you can do this by soliciting feedback from customers and delivering them working software incrementally so they can take a look at it and then they can give their comments, their feedback to you. And this way teams can validate whether quality attribute goals are being achieved effectively. So in conclusion, in Agile software development, quality attributes evolve throughout the project lifecycle in response to changing requirements, feedback, and project constraints. The key findings regarding this evolution include that there's an early emphasis on flexibility and adaptability because Agile methodologies prioritize flexibility and adaptability from the inception, from the very start of the project. Additionally, continuous improvement of scalability. Agile practices facilitate the scalability of software projects by providing frameworks and techniques for scaling development offers. Next, we have ongoing focus on maintainability. This is something that we saw was very important and something that our findings show is very valuable in agile practices. So teams should prioritize practices like continuous integration, automated testing, refactoring, and do all of this to ensure their code base remains manageable and adaptable over time. And finally, another key finding is that integration of quality assurance throughout the life cycle. Agile methodologies need to integrate quality assurance activities throughout the entire life cycle. Things like emphasizing continuous testing, taking in feedback, and having collaboration. Thank you all for listening. I hope this was beneficial to you and you learned something.